Good evening, everyone. Welcome to San Mateo County Dental Society meeting. It looks like we have, good group of people joining us tonight. My name is Wan Lee, and I'm the 2024 San Mateo Dental County Dental Society president. Before we get started, I wanted to review how we will be running this meeting. All participants will place on mute during the presentation. You may post a question into the question Q&A box. For those participants on your desktop, the Q&A box is located on the bottom of your screen. And for those on the iPad or iPhone, the Q&A box should be on the upper right side. Please feel free to post your question, and if time permits, we will go over them at the end. So now we can get started. Today is combating day-to-day insurance problem. Mr. Benjamin Tuinei began his dental career in 2007 while working for a small dental corporation in Phoenix, Arizona, managing all insurance-related functions. During his first few months, he created system and operating protocols and restructured a 12-person billing department that improved collections from a low 65% to 98%. Mr. Tuinei opened Optimum Dental Solution in September 2009 to serve the needs of dentists who were actively seeking assistance in improving their insurance and reimbursements. In 2014, Optimum Dental Solution was rebranded to Veritas Dental Resources. During its first 2 years in operation, Optimum Dental Solution contracted with over 400 dental practices, influencing a combined 10 million in additional annual revenue increases by implementing Mr. Tuinei's proprietary PPO optimizations, strategies, and effective third-party payer negotiating. To date, Mr. Tuinei has worked with over 7,000 dentists, influencing over $3 billion of newly negotiating revenue for his clients. He currently serves as the president of Veritas Dental Resources and sits on the board of directors for the Dental Business School, Business Ownership Mentoring of America, the Dental Leadership Academy, and the co-host on the Navigating Dental Insurance podcast. Mr. Tuinei has been recognized by several state dental associations and various dental study clubs as the authority on PPO strategies and PPO fee negotiating. Without further ado, may I introduce you, Mr. Benjamin Tuinei.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that kind introduction. And good evening to everybody. My name is Ben Tuinei, and we're going to be tackling a topic that, of course, is near and dear to all of our hearts, the insurance problems that we deal with on a daily basis. We're not going to cover everything in terms of all insurance problems. So I have a focus of what I hear in terms of the problems that are faced in California. So unlike the last webinar that we did a couple of months ago, we're not going to talk about fee negotiations. We're just going to look at the administrative side of insurance issues, and then we'll talk about some solutions that have proven to be very effective and helpful in your state. I want to start first with this whole concept of the why. You know, when you think about for a second here, you know, some basic questions. For instance, you know, what motivated you to get into dentistry, and what motivates us to get out of bed every morning, right? What is it that keeps us doing what we do in an environment that is very stressful, especially when you're dealing with insurance companies and having to chase claims down, having to take on the role of the insurance carrier by letting patients know what their benefit structure is, right? You're taking on a lot, including the clinical component, And in my opinion, the insurance stuff is a huge distraction, right? We don't like it. Like most practices could do away with insurance if they could. But what is your why? Like what motivates you to come into work? What motivates you to deal with insurance? What motivates you to want to learn? I want to briefly go through my why. I do this on every presentation I give, mainly because understanding where I'm coming from is important. And my why is perfectly relevant to insurance because it's all about insurance and a personal story behind an experience that my family had over a decade ago. Before I show the next set of images, I do want to give out a trigger warning that what you're about to see are images of a premature child. And I fully recognize that oftentimes images of premature children can be a trigger for those that have been through the same experience. So I apologize in advance if that brings up any raw emotions among any of the attendees tonight, but bear with me simply because this is the foundation of everything that I teach in dentistry as it pertains to insurance. This is just a little bit tough to kind of palate for those of you that have been through the experience. So here we go. I want you I want to invite you to my home and meet my son, Welton. Now, my son, Welton, as you can see here, was delivered at 24 weeks gestation. So a backstory behind this is that, my history is I'm from the South Pacific. I grew up in American Samoa, and I'm part Samoan, Hawaiian, Japanese. And naturally, people from Samoa, especially the boys, are sort of given the stereotype of being great football players, which I think is true. I think naturally we inherently pick up that skill. I learned how to tackle by tackling bananas in an effort to clear our fields, and replant them. And my wife was a softball player. So meeting together and getting married in our late 20s, having a child at that point, we were already warned that, the older you get, pregnancy is a little bit tougher on the mothers. And so in this case, my son, when he was at 19 weeks gestation, my wife, when she was at 19 weeks gestation, she started to show signs of kidney failure. She did, not my son. She was still in the womb developing. Given, at home bed rest as a treatment plan, which we followed. They took this very seriously, simply because they did predict that there might be a very high chance that our child would be delivered prematurely. So in this case, we followed the treatment plan, and 2 weeks later, sorry, not 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, at 22 weeks gestation, the labs came back and now indicated that she was in kidney failure and immediately admitted into the hospital. The plan and the objective was to keep her stress level and blood pressure low, minute by minute monitoring in an effort to keep the child in the womb for at least another 2 weeks. The reason why is because the science at the time indicated that 22 weekers don't survive. 23 weekers have a 7% chance of survival. 24 weekers have an 86 chance or above. So the longer you're in the womb, the greater your chances are, especially after you reach that 24-week mark. So we made it to 24 weeks in 2 days. And at this point, the labs came back and the test came back, and in comes the obstetricians to deliver the news. And the OBs came in and basically said, hey, today's the day. And the hour is at hand that we have to deliver your son. And the reason why is because you are now in heart failure. And you could see the physical characteristics of liver failure and hard to detect heart failure on the surface, but you could tell that her body was deteriorating, shutting down. And as you know, after the heart fails, there's really it's the end of the journey for that person. So we couldn't let that happen. So they wheeled her off to surgery. And this is quite literally 10 minutes after my son Welton was delivered. He was 1 pound, 10 ounces, 13 inches in height. Needless to say, a struggling little guy. After this photo was snapped, I went back to the OR. They closed my wife up, and then we wheeled her back to her recovery room, of course, heavily sedated. And I sit in this room, now it's closer to 11 o'clock at night, and I sit there for about a half an hour before the next person comes in, just sitting there pondering very quietly as a athlete, a former athlete at this time, a new business owner. A little bit raw emotions, first-time father and all that, trying to figure out next steps, how to be a good person, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father was my goal. And not too long into this really important pondering experience for me, I hear this faint knock on the door, and in comes a gentleman wearing suit and tie, carrying a stack of papers about that thick, about a ream of, a ream of paper that you get from Home Depot, Office Depot, or any of like Staples or whatever. And it was a very thick document. He comes in and he says, "Mr. Tuinei, congratulations on being a first-time father. I just want to let you know that both you and your wife, your wife and your son are in really good hands in this hospital. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that they have a comfortable experience. My name is so-and-so, and I'm the billing manager of this hospital, and I'm here to give you information so you can make a consent about the next phase of your son's treatment." He then handed me that thick document, and my first instinct was to turn it to the last page and look at how many pages it was. And sure enough, I did, and it was 603 pages long. The gentleman then proceeded to say, "This document is basically our way of getting consent. This is our legal document that would allow us to proceed with the next phase of your son's treatment, and all we need for you to do is sign it after I explain what the treatment is. So essentially, your son requires open heart surgery, one of which, if not performed in the next 40 to 60 minutes, he will not make it. So this is actually very urgent. And we have doctors and nurses that are scrubbing in at they're going to be performing the surgery at the incubator. Right where you left your son is where he will be, and that's where he will be after the surgery that you can visit him." And so essentially, that's the reason for this, is that we just need for you to authorize the surgery and allow the hospital to use its resources to save your son. I then glanced at the first couple of pages of this legal document, this 603-page legal document. Having written multiple contracts throughout my lifetime to this point, I knew a thing or two about legal language, contract language. I've had great training from my dad and sister who are lawyers. I'm not a lawyer myself, as well as our own retained attorneys that work for our business. And I couldn't understand the 1960s legal style of writing, written in an era, the language of which written by a specific attorney was in an era of contract language that I didn't understand. So I asked the gentleman, the billing manager, to kind of give me more information. Like, I don't really feel like I understand what's going on and what the risks are, what the alternative treatment options are. I haven't heard any of that. You're asking me to sign a document blindly. So can you give me a little bit more information so I can make a truly informed decision? So we debated over this concept of informed consent. He tried his best to give me enough information that would influence me to sign the document, but it still was not enough. After the 5th minute, we were both watching our clock watching at that point. It's like, look, a minute it might as well be 10 hours. That's what it feels like when you're responsible for making a decision that could result in somebody dying. And I knew that. I took that very seriously because the doctors coached me that there might be a possibility that I'm going to have to make a decision like that, a very uncomfortable decision. But I didn't want to go into this to make a decision when the information wasn't fully given for me to make the right, at least an informed decision and the best decision. So at this point, the billing manager put his foot down and said, "Ben, bottom line is that you signed this document and your son has a fighting chance. You don't sign this document and you are guaranteeing that he will not survive the night. How you wish to proceed, we will respect your decision." So I signed the documents. I felt defeated, and I handed it back to him, and I said, "Look, what I'm signing is an acknowledgement that there are 603 pages worth of words in a legal document that I don't understand and don't have time to read. So I'm going off of what you're telling me, which, it's easy for me to build an argument in a court of law that the true piece of information for me to make this decision came out of your mouth. It didn't come from these documents." So I feel like at that point, from a legal informed consent perspective, he realized that he wasn't talking to an idiot. So he then turned to me and said, "Well, what I know about your son's treatment is that you just so happen to have health insurance where the doctors that normally perform this surgery are out of network, and your plan does not have coverage for this out of network surgery. But we do have other doctors in here that routinely perform this surgery. that are participating with your health plan, and those are the doctors that you would authorize to come in, scrub in, and perform this procedure. So that's all. He shared that, and that's when I stopped and I said, okay, thank you. Now I know what to ask. And what I'm going to ask is the most important question, and then I'll make a decision. What is the difference in survival when, in this case, a experienced cardiothoracic surgeon that actually deals with 24-weekers, compared to that of, in this case, they're having general surgeons scrub in? What is the survival rate difference? And by the way, this story has nothing to do with a grievance against the doctors or any of the clinical team members. They had no idea that these policies were instituted in clinical settings. There's a whole story behind how this happens and how doctors perceive what they're being asked to do, and the deceit that's involved in those administrative processes, which we won't talk about right now. But essentially, when I turned and asked, what is the survival rate difference? Cardiothoracic surgeon, general surgeon. He started with the cardiothoracic surgeons and said 98% or above, depending on the surgeon. And those are great odds. To me, that's what you would expect, right? I thought for a minute there that the odds were a lot less than that for survival. And then he turns to the general surgeons and very hesitantly whispers, the survival rate is 15%. Not 50, 15, 1, 5. That's 5 less than 20. That's 5 more than 10. And the minute I heard that, after I heard the 98%, my jaw dropped. All the adrenaline and aggression that I only ever felt when I was actually on the football field as an athlete, it started to kick in terms of game mode. It's like, okay, who do I need to smash now? But fortunately, I was raised with good parents, and I understood, the consequences of physical violence and all that. And I knew that wasn't the solution. It just kind of passed through my brain like lightning speed. And I finally then turned to him. I said, okay, thank you for sharing these options with me. Are you aware of a law called the High-Tech Act? He said, yes, sir, I'm aware of the High-Tech Act, passed in 2009. We are standing in 2010 during this particular incident. And I said, you're aware that the High-Tech Act gives me, as the father of the patient, the ability to waive the use of insurance and pay for the surgery out of my own pocket. You understand this, right? And he said, yes, sir, we were briefed on that last year. And I said, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I voided out signature on page 603. I turned the page over and I put high-tech insurance waiver. I hereby elect to waive the use of my insurance for this particular open heart surgery. And I do require I do wish to retain the cardiothoracic surgeons to come in, and not just any cardiothoracic surgeon, the best one that deals with premature children, to come in and engage in this surgery. And I will put up whatever collateral that is necessary for the hospital to authorize this emergency surgery. So they accepted that, of course, I gave him my entire wallet. I said, whatever cash, credit cards, you could swipe all of it. I don't care what it costs. As a first-time father, I'm going to do this right, or at least do everything that I can so I don't start being a father with a failure, right? And so they accepted my terms, and the result was beautiful. Not only did he survive, and my wife survived. He's watching the Dodgers game right now, and my wife's upstairs watching Jeopardy. And they're living beautiful lives. And I credit that to the fact that, being in dentistry and learning all these concepts, learning how to deal with insurance carriers, learning the laws, learning what your options are, has been tremendous in terms of how we view medicine in general. To me, quality is the most important thing when I make a selection of doctors to go to. And I know that when I call and I get the experience in terms of how they deal with you over the phone, and then dealing with them in terms of the consultation, you could tell, especially after researching doctors and clinical team members and things of that nature, as it pertains to what my son needed following this particular incident. But to me, quality is the most important thing. And I was so surprised that I wasn't given that, and that my insurance created a system that prevented me from having access to quality the first time around. I had to dig for it. And so when it comes to insurance and problems and struggles that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, I hope we don't lose sight of the quality focus. And what I share in terms of information is processes to fight insurance, to manage insurance within a practice in an effort for us to protect the financial integrity of quality care. That is my mission, and the face on the screen is the evidence of that. So this is him at age 2, Incredible Hulk. This is, well, I've never been a clinician, but this is my first ever extraction. I didn't do so well on all the others, but this one was beautiful. And, you know, they say that children emulate their parents. Here he is wearing his mom's favorite football team's sweatshirt. And what he's doing with his hands, I'm fairly certain that he got that from my wife as well. But he does emulate us in almost every aspect of who we are as parents. And I'm proud to call him my son. He's a smart boy, very talented athlete as well. But that's my story in terms of my why. My why is very much on the side of how do we deal with insurance without compromising our standards? How do we enforce our standards with insurance carriers? And a lot of it has to do with money. You spend so much in payroll to fight the insurance companies, and you write off so much. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. There's so much that's written off, and there's little regard to quality on the part of the insurance companies. They have no care in the world. And I wish my voice were a lot louder to the entire community, the United States of America, to warn people that insurance is not your friend. They're not there to get you healthier. And I have all kinds of evidence and data to indicate that that is 100% the case. Okay? I want to pivot now and sort of talk about this whole concept of trust. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes, but I'm just doing some foundational work here. You know, there's a guy by the name of Derek Hamilton in 1996. He was convicted for a crime that he didn't commit and spent 23 years in prison. While in prison, he actually he studied and passed law school. He went to school and became a lawyer and passed the bar. In short, Hamilton fought his own case and was able to overturn his own conviction. And the evidence of such that he was able to find and produce while in lockup resulted in a $7 million settlement for an imprisonment that was based upon false and fabricated evidence. You know, we hear this kind of story way too much, especially in dentistry. I mean, we all know this. The California Dental Association started Delta, Oregon Dental Association, Washington Dental Association. These are the 3 states that started the idea and concept of having a dental plan. And it was beautiful back in the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s. The 80s is when was a pivotal turn with dental plans and dental plans in general, because that's when it became more competitive. That's when more people, more insurance carriers decided to follow suit. And that's really when Delta Dental started to change in terms of how they deal with you now. You know, a good example of how all insurance carriers care about quality is that inflation in dentistry. So I checked out a bunch of different sources on what is the true inflation in dentistry since 2020. And it seems like in Southern Cal, it's a lot higher than Northern Cal. But the average for your state is hovering around 18%. I mean, I've seen some statistics, some other data that's saying that, no, it's closer to 30%. But when I average it all out for the whole state, it comes out to about 18% among all the opinion leaders that track economic data in your state. This is just for dentistry, by the way. And, you know, in 2021, the AGD and the ADA put out this statement to ask the insurance industry to help. Because with inflation at the time, that was probably when we started to see major wage inflation. It was intolerable for most dental practices. And what happened? How did the insurance industry respond in 2021, 22, and 23? Well, they started to cut fees. Cigna is actually still doing this, cutting fees 15 to 36%. Delta Dental in many states, including California, sadly, 10 to 20% cuts. Dentamax, major umbrella network, they started this in California where they started slashing fees 7 to 18%. You know, at the end of the day, we're finding still too many of our own team members standing in food bank lines after work in an effort to survive because the 2 or 3 jobs that they're dealing with aren't paying the bills, right? So we're all kind of feeling that economic crunch. But I believe in dentistry, the insurance problems that we are experiencing not only are fueling and driving a high rate of doctors going out of network, but it is also fueling a lot of advocacy work in an effort to have meaningful change and hopefully a subset of laws that'll help us enforce illegal and unethical acts on the part of the insurance industry. So we're going to cover a bunch of things today. If we have time, we're going to cover a few more things. I want to cover what's on the screen here today. What is a clean claim? Why are clean claims denied? Why do insurance carriers deny a clean claim when their definition is not consistent with what the law says? Refund requests. So the last 3 years, the amount of refund requests that show up on your doorstep in the mail, right? It's risen significantly. And yesterday, I saw a refund request for a particular doctor from Guardian, and it was a $52,000 refund request. There was no evidence, and there was absolutely no indication of where they found that dollar. They just said either pay up or we're going to pull this money from future claims payouts, right? The other part we're seeing is that with all this hacking going on, Change Healthcare last year, the tech meltdown in July that affected my business too, Microsoft users, but mostly airlines and all that. We started to see a pattern of being abruptly dropped by insurance carriers without notice. In my rule book, that's patient abandonment on the part of insurance, especially if there are no out-of-network benefits. So we'll talk about that. Eliminating statements. So that part there's too much what I'm seeing across the country in terms of the data. Patients are walking out either not paying what they're supposed to pay for treatment, or they're underpaying, and we're having to chase these patients down. It is so much easier to give patients a refund or a credit than it is to chase them down with a statement. And we'll go over that. Non-covered services, you have a law that gives you options and flexibility on what to do there for non-covered services. Audits are on the rise, so how to prepare for one and how to avoid one is what we'll talk about. And then the last part here is, too often insurance carriers attempt to insert their opinion about the diagnosis or deny a claim and indicate that, hey, we're going to downgrade this, or, this is a better, more fitting code, right? And basically what they're saying is that you misdiagnosed, or if you did legitimately use the wrong code, they can at least pursue a correction on that, but they cannot change the diagnosis, which we'll talk about in terms of how that works from a licensing perspective. All right. So let's talk about just general numbers. Realities of insurance is that only 6% of people with PPO plan reach their annual maximum. Only 22% obtain a restorative procedure every year, indicated by a deductible that they pay. 36% of adults go annually. Interestingly, Denti-Cal and Medi-Cal, it's only 51% of people that have Denti-Cal or Medi-Cal actually go to a dentist once a year, right? We're seeing a lot of adjudication or denials, claims being adjudicated, subsequently being denied. And when we do our own investigation, and I'll show you how to do that, we're finding that computers are generating those denials. In fact, last year, if you remember, there was a headline with all news agencies in August of last year that Cigna had a record number of denied claims in a minute. I can't remember the figure, but they had artificial intelligence systems automatically denying millions upon millions of dollars worth of claims every single day. No review, no proper adjudication. And so this is the insurance system being exposed, because they're not the only one that does that. I imagine that a lot of insurance carriers do that just by how these denial patterns occur. Cigna's not the only one. And the last thing is that sickens me is that when you sign up with a dental plan, the insurance company brags about that to the employer and saying, see, we got a long list of doctors that endorse us as the insurance company. And what they're saying is that we have a long list of providers that are in network, but they call that an endorsement, right? Which is another reason why we need to consider dropping insurance. So I pulled this data. I believe this was 2017. In and around $60 million worth of claims in 2016 was denied. If you were to guess, what percentage of that 60 million was overturned through the appeal process? And the answer is going to really upset a lot of you. It was only 5%. 5% of 60 million is only $3 million. So what that converts to in terms of savings for an insurance carrier or insurance industry is $57 million. You think our investment strategies are really good, especially interest-bearing accounts, buying bonds, having a private client deal with your bank. A $57 million account, just with today's interest, like American Express, a high interest savings account is 4%. That's a little fortune, right? All of us can live off of just the interest alone. And that's the game that the insurance company plays. They don't only earn money by minimizing claims payout, they earn even more with the amount of money that they invest, right? In all kinds of different investment portfolios in an effort to give them what they have now. Their names appear on every big building, lots of stadiums across the country, right? And that's just the world that we live in. So when it comes to denial of claims, that 60 million, when I looked at EOB data as to the reason why, is a lot of the notes indicated that, well, this is not a clean claim. So what does constitute a clean claim? Well, in short, what the law says in California and just about every other state is that a clean claim is a claim that has no improprieties or defects. Is the tax ID right? Is the spelling of the billing entity correct? Are the NPI numbers correct? It has nothing or very little to do with the codes. A clean claim is just basically making sure that all the identifiers are entered in properly and that the claim is entered in properly. But the insurance carriers take it a step further on the dental side, where they start to change definitions and say, well, I couldn't see anything on those x-rays, or they'll make an indication of something that you already included in your narrative, and they'll say, well, I didn't see a narrative, right? And so we're seeing a lot of these denials, and the true reason is that the insurance company is saying it's not a clean claim. It's like, well, it is a clean claim. You're just trying to re-diagnose treatment for your own sake to deny the claim, right? And I'll kind of point out how that statement can be used as we read EOBs and understand what EOBs are really saying, right? So we have to have a really good denial management system, mainly because claims denials in 2023 compared to 2017, the data that I'm collecting so far is more than double on the amount of claims that were denied last year. It's more than double that of 2017. And it seems like every single year you see that number on the rise. So all more reason for us to engage in very effective appeal processes. So one of the most common reasons for denials is frequency limitations. Now that's something that we cannot get around, right? Or we can at least ask, like for instance, if the patient has gum disease and they're in perio maintenance, they get 2 perio maintenances a year in terms of the benefit. But those benefits for perio are separate from that of preventative. So they also have 2 prophy benefits. But if they're in perio, you cannot use the prophy code unless the patient is going to a periodontist to get their perio maintenance. Then you can use the prophy code at the general dentistry practice for most insurance carriers. That's something that has to be verified. But if you're managing the perio maintenance in the general dentistry practice, you can request to have the insurance carriers utilize the 1110 benefit if you've already used 2 of the perio maintenances and the patient needs more than just 2 cleanings in the year, right? So keep that in mind, is that you could be creative in making requests for the insurance carriers to use an alternative benefit or approve an alternative benefit that is not already written in the plan design. And what I mean by that is when you place a posterior composite, a lot of times the patient's plan design will say, well, we don't cover posterior composites, but we do cover amalgam, right? So what we're going to do is instead of denying the posterior composites, we're going to use an alternative benefit or downgrade it, right? They don't use the word downgrade, we use it, but they use alternative benefit. And we're going to give the patient some coverage compared to no coverage. So you could use that with the insurance carriers when there are frequency issues in an effort to have an alternative code that's covered, provide some reimbursement and relief to the patient, right? Insufficient x-rays, that's a big one these days. But yeah, just keep note of these things. 2022 to compared to today is the same as far as the reason for the denials, right? What I want to mention as well with the rate of denials that are happening is that there's a quick and easy way to put these denials, well, I shouldn't say quick and easy. There's a very effective way to put these consistent denials to bed. and that's becoming the patient's advocate, right? And when we become the patient's advocate, I recommend using the insurance commissioner. There are two types of plans, dental plans one of which the insurance commissioner governs, and those are fully insured plans. That's basically if I, as a person, go to the healthcare.gov and acquire a health plan there, or I don't get health insurance through my company, I get it privately. Or if I do get it as a small business owner and it's not through, it's not a self-funded plan, right? For a lot of people, if it's just for my family, maybe a couple other employees and their families, chances are those are fully insured plans. But if I get my insurance through Microsoft or through my employer, like Amazon, Walmart, Costco, you name it, at that point, most big businesses would self-insure their program. They would pay their own claims, right? And hire Delta or somebody else, pay them a 5% admin fee to process claims. So I mentioned that simply because if you contact the insurance commissioner and the patient has a self-funded plan through a big employer, the insurance commissioner in California has no jurisdiction over those patients. But I wouldn't worry about that. So I bring this up simply because you'll run into this with a lot of your patients where you try to contact the insurance commissioner and the commissioner says, well, they have a self-funded plan. We don't do that. You have to contact the Department of Justice, right? And they usually give you that contact information. But for the rest, you'll most certainly see a change. So if we get the fully insured patients and the insurance commissioner takes those cases, what you often see is that as the insurance carrier gets beat up by the insurance company, the self-funded plans that they're administering they'll have a reduction, and over time the denials will eliminate as well. They'll go away simply because the insurance carrier, they don't want you to complain to the federal department because the fines at the state level are already steep. At the federal level, sometimes the fines for claims processing violations are even steeper. So how do we utilize an insurance commissioner? Well, number one, always understand that when you contact the insurance commissioner, you cannot contact them on your behalf. Like, you're not contacting the insurance commissioner saying, I'm representing myself as the dentist or the dental office. The insurance commissioner is not licensed to take your case, but they are for the patient, the consumer, right? So when I call the insurance commissioner, I say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I work for so-and-so, and I'm representing a patient who's asked me to be their advocate in an effort to get an audit or a review on a denied claim that we believe should have been paid. And then the insurance commissioner would give you all the instructions and the documentation in an effort for the commissioner to take on the case. But it's important for you to know that simply because when you ask the patients to contact the insurance commissioner, very few of them do. If you take that on, you'll be a big hero. You'll get 5-star reviews, and you'll get a loyal patient. So now that we understand that, we have to be the patient's advocate. We're representing them. We always want to make sure that we are doing the best dentistry and we are pairing the right codes. We understand the CDT codes and there are no mistakes there, right? When we prepare to go to the insurance commissioner will never take on the first denial, right? If you haven't appealed once, the insurance commissioner will say, well, no, you got to appeal, and that way we can see what the decision is on the appeal. After the first appeal, you could then go to the insurance commissioner. But what I would do if you've never taken a case to the insurance commissioner is try to help them out. Try to find a pattern of delay tactics. So if you see an insurance carrier consistently denying certain codes, keep note of that. If it's a specific insurance carrier that's denying for a certain employer group, keep note of that, right? Those things will help you in an effort to go to the insurance commissioner and say, hey, it's not just this one patient, but we've done our own internal investigation, and it takes us 4 appeals before they overturn a claim. This is a major delay tactic that we are being penalized with. We're paying payroll, but more importantly, payroll to manage these ridiculously denied claims of the delay tactic. But more importantly, the patients are suffering because they're running the risk of not getting their benefits covered, benefits that they're entitled to, right? And then, of course, you have to be relentless. You have to really try hard. If there's one case that doesn't work with the insurance commissioner, take the next one to them. What we're finding these days is that the more and more practices contact the insurance commissioner, the more successful they are, the more helpful the insurance commissioner is in advocating for your patients. And that alone stops these denials because, Tessina, who works on our team, she also works for an office as an office manager, dental practice. When she did this a number of years ago, I learned that the insurance commissioner was giving the insurance companies a citation of $2,500 per incident. So she went through hundreds of claims to report to the insurance commissioner just to upset the insurance industry. And what that resulted in is that she doesn't get any denials. Like all those denials, they went away. She gets her claims paid for the first time around. Imagine that kind of relief and not having to deal with consistent denials that are on the rise as of late. So this is sort of how you use the insurance commissioner to engage in meaningful advocacy. Another appeal tactic is this, is you can actually contact the insurance company and say, I want to speak to the HIPAA compliance officer or the privacy officer. So by law, every insurance carrier is required to have a privacy officer. And I usually say, hey, when I reach this person, I want to ask for the names and credentials of every person who had access to the patient's record. Now, the patient has a right to know this, right? So you're making a HIPAA request. And then, of course, the reason for this is just to see, okay, was a computer the one that denied the claim, or was it a legitimate person, right? Most of the time when the insurance carrier knows that they had the computer issue the denial, they'll reverse it. They won't even share with you what you asked, which if they don't share, you can actually report that to the United States Office of Civil Affairs, which I would highly recommend that you do. Even if they pay up the claim, you gotta let these insurance companies know that you're not gonna be messed around with, right? If you follow the law, you're not a bully and not unprofessional, and you're ethical in how you go about this, what you do tend to find is that the insurance companies will flag you in the right way. They'll flag you from the perspective of saying, hey, this person really, this practice knows their stuff. And we would rather not spend our time, kind of going after them with our standard tactics. Let's just go after practices that are not complaining as much, right? So there you go. 2 effective appeal strategies that have been proven to be very helpful. Oh, one more. So this is one that's not very well known in the industry. So when it comes to the current dental terminology, the CDT codes, those are actually owned and they're proprietary to the American Dental Association. So every insurance carrier, when you get a fee schedule from them, on the bottom, there's a disclosure that the CDT is owned by the American Dental Association. So when I investigated this, I found out that all the insurance carriers sign a contract with the American Dental Association to lease the CDT codes for claims processing purposes. Within that agreement, it does state that the insurance companies promise to not change the code definitions. But what's happening on a daily basis is like buildups. They're saying, well, there's not enough this or that, right? Well, the buildup, we're just not seeing enough there for what the code is intended to be. And if you have retention mentioned in your narrative, and there's 60% tooth structure loss, or what, and you mention that in your claim. Essentially, when the ADA says, well, we don't believe that that's the right code that you should have used, they're engaging in a code change, right? They're interpreting the code the wrong way to deny the claim. Scaling root planing is the same thing. Oh, there's only 4 millimeter pockets, right? They point out one thing, or saying that there's no bone loss on the x-rays, which is of course up to interpretation. But you have all this kind of activity where the insurance carrier is trying hard to not come out and say, you should have done this treatment. But in a roundabout way, when you read what they're doing, especially the denials and the remapping of codes, where they take the code for the procedure that you actually performed and they remap it to an entirely different code that's not related, saying, oh, this is a better fit, right? This is for what you submitted. This is actually the actual code that you should have used. Sometimes that's correct. If we have a team that is not fully proficient with CDT definitions, but most of the times it's not correct. It's an attempt by the insurance carrier to change the code. If you're an ADA member, you can actually contact the ADA and say, I need to get a hold of the coding compliance department or the attorneys that oversee coding. And I need to complain about an insurance carrier that's engaging in a direct violation of their agreement by changing the code definitions to deny a claim. This is a beauty in terms of quick advocacy, and I highly recommend it if you have a membership with the American Dental Association. So that's the appeals, several appeal tactics that you can use that on a daily basis are proven to sort of help your lives and having less stress on how you're getting paid. Now, refund requests, we're seeing this all the time. There's no data, no information whatsoever to indicate where they came up with that refund amount. And you do often see that, oh, well, the patient, they canceled their insurance plan the day before treatment was rendered, and we didn't know that until 2 weeks later. We paid the claim, so now we're asking for a refund. Well, that has nothing to do with you. You're not responsible for paying the patient's premium. It is the insurance company that made that mistake, and it is their responsibility to deal with it, to find a different way to settle up their account by going after the patient, right? They're the one that didn't pay their bill. So in essence, what you see here on the screen is a very basic refund request letter that you can send back to the insurance carrier. And you'll see that in the very middle, the longest paragraph in the middle there, it says Court of Los Angeles County. So a lot of the case law that's listed here is very friendly to that of the state of California, to which this refund request letter is very much appropriate for your state. So if you need a copy of this, if you're dealing with this or know somebody that is, send me an email. I'll share my contacts in the end, where I can most certainly send this to anybody that needs to have a copy of that. Another one is being dropped by the insurance company. So this is actually something that you can complain to the insurance commissioner too. And it's mostly from the perspective of, if the patient has no out-of-network benefits, you could say, I would encourage patients to call the insurance commissioner, especially if you've performed treatment and the termination date was retroactive before that treatment date, right? So all these patients are left without reimbursement. You can take this to the insurance commissioner and say, I was never notified, and the patients are abandoned. They came here under the understanding that I was in network, and I thought I was in network. I got no such letter to indicate that they dropped me. And now the patients are the ones that are the victims. They're not going to get their claims paid for unless you solve this as the insurance commissioner. And what we found is that every single incident, when you approach it from that perspective, the insurance commissioner contacts the insurance companies and says, we're going to do an investigation on this. Please respond to our correspondences immediately upon request. Before the insurance commissioner then puts together their case, the insurance company had already had you reinstated with all claims that were denied paid. So give that a try if you've dealt with or are dealing with that. Eliminating statements, excuse me. This is as easy as you got to estimate high. If you verify benefits and you don't know if that composite is going to be downgraded to amalgam on a posterior tooth, I always make it a rule of thumb that I'm going to collect 15% more. I'm going to calculate not 20%. I'm going to go to 35% on the patient's out of pocket. I want to have a little bit of a buffer in case there's a need, in case the treatment is downgraded. And most of the times 15% is more than enough, with a little bit of credit given back to the patient. And I contact the patients, I send them refund checks. This is so important because in a day and age where the internet is going crazy with fake everything, fake news, fake reviews, but also intentional bad reviews over things like this. You send a statement out to the patient, they're supposed to pay $800, but you collected $400. Now they owe you another $400. They're going to rip you to, well, not everybody, but good enough would go online to be a keyboard warrior just to give you a hard time. People have no concept of how damaging that is for businesses and how unfair it is, right? It's like, well, we tried our best, but even still, to prevent things like that from happening, reviews based upon negative reviews based upon your financial policies or your financial dealings with the patient, which, by the way, if you really look at all the bad reviews, none of them are about clinical. I very rarely see a negative review, 1-star review about the clinical component, maybe pain, yeah, but not necessarily about the clinical aspect. It's mostly financially related. So keep this in mind, is always make sure that you have a policy to avoid statements altogether. And collecting more is the simple solution to that. Profiles is also a key thing. This particular employer, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of this employer in California, but you can see here that the employer ID is the same, but the sub IDs are not. The bottom plan is a $1,000 annual maximum with zero coverage for major procedures. while the top plan for the executives is a $3,000 annual max with 60% coverage for major. The executives pay, closer to $60 per person per month to get that plan, while the employees who select the low tier plan, they usually only come out of pocket about $15 a month, and the employer will pay the other $5 or $10. But if you treatment plan incorrectly, which we see this all the time, we verify patients' benefits. It's a patient with the low tier policy 4, Division 55. But we verify benefits and build the treatment plan based upon the top tier, right? And we do 5 crowns on the patient, thinking that it's 60% coverage. So we collect 40% from the patient. And then when the EOBs come back and it's 0% coverage, now the patient owes 100%. Patients will get upset, right? And naturally, it's kind of hard to deal with that when that's a mistake that we make, not giving the patient the right information about coverage, right? Which is an unfortunate thing, because that's something that patients should be doing, or the insurance carriers should have a protocol to make it easy for patients to get that information, which they never will. So having your profiles, your employer profiles in your system is so important to do that correctly. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about non-covered services. Now, in your state, it basically, this is Washington, my apologies. The Washington law is very similar to that of yours, but basically what your non-covered service law states is that if a procedure is not covered by a dental plan, then, and that dental plan provides reimbursement, then at that point, the practice can charge their full fees or up to their full fees for the procedure. But it has to be a true non-covered service. It can't be a denial based upon frequency or limitations, meaning, yeah, we would have covered it, but the patient has met their frequency, and there's a limit on what benefits the patient can have. They can't get 3 pro fees; they can only get 2 in a year. So the third pro fee is not a non-covered service. The third pro fee is still you're only able to collect the in-network fee from the patient simply because it's a covered service, but you've used the benefits, right? So non-covered service is when the pro fee is never covered. As an example, well, a better example are veneers, sometimes night guards, right? Things that are never covered by the dental plan. You get to charge your full fee, no questions asked. Well, I'd say the only issue that we run into nationwide is that it's a definition between self-funded plans that are not governed by the state and fully insured plans that are. So the prevailing, well, not a prevailing argument. One argument is that non-covered service laws only apply to fully insured plans. My counter argument is, well, if a dentist or a dental specialist has to acquire a dental license in the state of California in order for them to practice and bill to get money for the procedures that they're doing, and if that's governed by the state of California, then those licenses have full protection under all the laws that are written in dentistry in that particular state. There's no way for a doctor to get a federal license. So yeah, the ERISA federal laws are designed for the employer and the plan on how it's written and how the financial component works for them. But my dental license governs that is governed by the state laws. I have access to that non-covered service law, and it's going to be fully enforced in my practice as it is my privilege according to my license, right? So that's how I argue that when people say, no, you can't charge full fees for non-covered services if it's a self-funded plan. Random audits are not random. You would have to be engaging in all kinds of red flag activities, like overbilling is a good thing. I mean, not a good thing, is a common thing these days, where it's a 2-surface composite, but it's being submitted as a 4-surface composite, right? A lot of data is indicating that codes are being submitted when treatment was not being performed. Naturally, when you engage in that kind of activity consistently, it is going to raise red flags with the insurance industry. There's a lot of technology to detect fraud, and the insurance company is getting better and better and better at vetting out overbilling issues. But audits will come about, and they're never random. You have to make sure that you're doing things appropriately. You have to make sure that you have your consent forms written correctly, especially if you're doing material fees like upgrades. California has a record number of doctors being sued by Delta Dental for charging upgrades. While it's your right to charge a patient for an added value non-covered service that the patient's plan design doesn't cover, that's an upgrade, by the way. The problem is a lot of doctors are not having their consent forms in order. So there's no written evidence that the patient agreed to paying those extra fees. And naturally, doctors are losing tens of thousands. Some are losing over $100,000 having to refund patients all that money. So just make sure that your ducks are in a row and you're following, to the best of your knowledge, the most ethical and professional insurance administration and coding practices. If you get audited, let me know, and I can kind of help you investigate why you're being audited and help you figure out exactly what to do to reverse those, at least to get around those audits, get through them successfully. Okay. So we talked about this in terms of the ADA. I'm going to skip through that since we only have about a half an hour left, but I want to do a Q&A. But here's a quick summary: is we have to manage the denials efficiently and effectively and use those protocols that I mentioned in terms of contacting the ADA, the insurance commissioner, or a privacy officer route is a good way to get the insurance company's attention and have them backpedal for once, right? Because now they're in defense. You want to put them in defense as much as you can because they don't like that. All righty, so we're gonna move on from this and go to the next topic here, which is essentially this whole concept again of trust. The insurance industry saying, hey, dental insurance was created by the dentist, and it was created to foster trust with the public, which is totally true. The dental plans created by the California Dental Association, the initial ones that Delta eventually took over, were designed to provide benefits for the unions and to test out a benefit system that would increase the rate of visits to the dental office among the communities, right? Dental insurance did not exist before the 1950s. But what was noticed on the healthcare side of things, or any insurance plan type that was developed before the 1950s, is that having insurance, it did increase the utilization. It increased the visits, like the health insurance. It increases, at least when we signed up for health insurance, coming from an era where we were very poor and couldn't afford insurance. And once we enrolled, we started to take our health a lot more seriously, right? And it was easier for us to kind of be reminded to go and check with our physicians and do regular checkups and things of that nature. It works the same way in dentistry, where the most active people in dentistry in terms of our patients are those that have insurance. And we all know, when it comes to the money, forgive me if the next set of slides really tick you off or upset you, but when it comes to the money flow, we all know what happens. Now, in the state of Washington, this is not a public shaming effort. In fact, the images and faces you're about to see, this is public knowledge. You can find this in the Washington State Dental Association. They get this disclosure from Delta Dental Washington every year. On the top there, James, the former CEO, look at that. $2.6 million for 0 hours of work. That was his exit plan, and he got paid this amount many years, or at least the excess amount, because they're still registered as a non-for-profit. But you see other positions there, the vice president of innovations and provider relations. So think of this, the vice president of provider relations for an insurance company, $421,000. That person is almost in the 1% of income earners in the United States. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm all about capitalism, but for a not-for-profit, I think this is abuse of the privilege of having that tax-exempt status, right? Here is the commercial insurance carriers, the for-profit, publicly traded companies. What I take about from this slide here is that, Bruce might as well be a slacker. He's only making $16 million, while, Larry there to the bottom left is getting $23 million. When you add bonuses and dividends, Bruce actually makes closer to $50 million a year, but these are just their general base salaries. So this is where the money goes. And when you talk about fiduciary responsibility, who do these insurance carriers, who are they responsible to? And I will tell you, it's not the patients, and it is not the doctors, it's the shareholders. And in the case of Delta Dental of Washington, Delta Dental has a fiduciary responsibility to James Dwyer and to Mark Mischke. These are the top two income earners for Delta, even Bradley Bird. It's a not-for-profit, and these are the highest paid individuals. For a not-for-profit, they get paid significantly more than even the largest of nonprofits that you have out there in the world. I just don't get it. I don't understand as a public how we tolerate this. All right, I want to close with this last concept, which is an art of war concept. I do write for Dental Economics. I'm one of the contributors, a part-time contributor. You'll see a lot of articles coming out for me next year, though, in the magazine. And I wrote this article based upon the concepts of art of war. Being a football guy myself, art of war concepts are perfect for sports, but they're also perfect for business. And here's how. So here's one quote in the art of war. I always thought as a defensive tackle, I played for the University of Arizona. I always thought that defense wins championships. And as I studied sports more after my athletic career, it was overwhelmingly convincing that that was not true. Defenses can help you win, but the true winners are the offense. And here's sort of the reason why. You have New England. So this was several years ago, New England Patriots, when Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were there against the Falcons. Look at the second quarter. So the second quarter ended with Atlanta up 21, New England 3. The game ended in overtime, and the Patriots won 34-28. So that means Atlanta only scored one touchdown, in the third quarter, whereas the second half, New England came out with what we know them to do. They came back with a vengeance. They came back and they came out of the locker room motivated with a specific plan to turn the game around. The problem with Atlanta is that in the locker room at the halftime, they celebrated. That is a no-no in the sports industry. Like, I knew that when I was in high school, is that if we're beating a team 60-0, we're still studying plays in the locker room. We're still figuring things out, right? Trying to go through our techniques, right? We're still trying to get better. Because in sports, when you're complacent, especially at the professional level, the game isn't won until the last second expires. So this is why defenses are not necessarily the number one thing when it comes to winning. Here's, this is Alabama. Alabama, they do one thing really great, is that they play two games at the same time. Today, we're going to play the team that's on the field, but also today, we're going to play the team that's going to be watching this because we're going to be playing them next week. So think about that. If I just got blown, if I'm the second team on the schedule and I watch Alabama play the first team and they blow them out 51-14, as an athlete, I'm thinking, man, these guys are really good. I've already convinced myself that we're going to lose. And that's exactly how they play these games, right? It's all about having a very aggressive offensive strategy. Well, how do we be aggressive with the insurance industry? Well, this is how. We talked about some of that. We have to appeal aggressively. We have to use the insurance commissioner, use the American Dental Association, right? We have to use, call and use the privacy route, right? When you have those angles, which not many dental practices advocate that way, but when you do, you will start to see the insurance carrier get a little bit nervous on how they treat you. They're going to be so afraid to accidentally deny a claim, right? Or to give you a hard time. They'll treat you with respect, right? When you do that. You have to negotiate fees, which is something that I do every single day in an effort to, fight back and let the insurance carriers know that, hey, no, these low pro fee reimbursements, they don't sustain the mission of quality, right? People cost money to hire these days. And then you challenge their ethics. I often point out to the insurance industry that they are not licensed to diagnose dentistry. So therefore, denying this claim on the basis that they disagree with the diagnosis is not legally something they're licensed to do. And if they feel that they have a right to do that, then I usually say, well, I hate to do this, but can I get the name, license number, and the NPI number of the person that decided to change the diagnosis? Because I have an obligation to now report that person to the dental board for engaging in an effort to diagnose a claim to deny it, therefore putting my patient in a bad financial situation because they're not going to get access to their benefits. Any dental board and insurance commissioner would find that argument very sound. We've used it, we still use it every single day. So here's another quote from The Art of War. We want to attack our enemy where he or she is unprepared, right? So this is actually very interesting because this is a military strategy. The Viet Cong, so the Vietnam War, that's one that I studied extensively, high school and college. And they had tunnel systems, the Viet Cong. They had tunnel systems. They had home field advantage, right? And they created tunnels mainly because of this. They wanted to get around. They didn't want their scouts to get caught, but they wanted to have their opponents caught off guard. When you have more weapons, more bombs, more helicopters, more technology, the only way that you can win against a powerhouse force is to use home field advantage the best way that you can. And you don't have to be the strongest to win a fight. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't need to have all the best tools and weapons. No, you just need to be smart, right? And use your brain and use your wits about you. And this is a really good one that I've seen applied in the sports industry, military strategy as well for centuries. And we apply this in dentistry this way is we want to cite Washington state law as much as we can. You don't need to be an attorney. And if you cite law and you then start to give advice or interpretations, you always have to say, hey, I'm not an attorney. This is just speculation. You have to be careful. If we represent ourselves as an attorney when we cite statute and we charge people for that, then the state of California has an issue with you representing yourself as a licensed attorney. But you can cite state law and just say, hey, the law says this. Here's a copy of the non-covered service law. That's a way to catch the insurance companies off guard because most of the provider relations people have no idea what the law says, right? Another part is when the doctors engage directly, and that's more of an acknowledgement, right? When the insurance company calls, just acknowledge them saying, hey, I just want to let you know, I appreciate you calling. I'm busy with patients. Can we keep our correspondences to email? And that way I can focus on my patients in the day and I can get back to you during my off hours when I'm doing admin work on my days off, right? Something along those lines, which is reasonable. But what you find when the doctors get involved on almost every level, negotiations, appealing denied claims, or at least acknowledging insurance carriers when they call, it goes a long way in terms of the insurance carrier thinking twice about abusing you with denials that you'll likely be able to catch and fight. And then lastly, we talked about advocating for the patients. The insurance commissioner route, the privacy route, and that third route, which has kind of eluded me for a minute here. Not very many people, not very many dentists are actually using those. So therefore, it does tend to catch the insurance companies off guard when you do use those tools consistently and regularly. Okay? Here's another one, is we have to attack the strategy, right? The enemy strategy. We have to first understand what it is. And we all know what it is. The insurance strategy is to collect premiums and not pay claims. Another strategy is to place the burden of insurance administration on you so that when the insurance company makes a mistake with the claim, the patient's claim, the patient yells at who? Yeah, they yell at you. That is by design. They force you to resubmit even though you sent in all the right information, keeping you guessing, meaning, submitting for verification of benefits or pre-authorization, and yet the claim was still denied despite you doing those things, forcing you to, it's deception, where the insurance carrier is doing a great job at forcing you to be on the defensive, in terms of you being beat up by the insurance company and the patient. And that's just, that's the bulk of their strategy is just to sort of keep you confused, right? Keep you guessing all the time. What I believe in an effort for us to attack the insurance strategy is we just need to do a much better job with our patients in not having in-network be the reason why they're coming to you, right? If you're in-network and your patients are coming to you mainly because you're in-network, we got to change that. We got to start talking about quality, right? Or finding ways to increase our customer service, right? What you do tend to find in every dental practice, well, actually in the dental industry in general, is that the number one and number two most trusted professionals, they work in the dental practice. The hygienist being number one, the doctors being number two. Don't be offended by that, doctors. There's a reason why. Nurses and hygienists are sort of considered the same profession in the eyes of the patient, while doctors, dentists, physicians, a lot of times the trust is very similar. It's very much the same in the sense that the public trusts medical professionals, right? But the reason why they trust hygienists and nurses more is because the hygienists and nurses, they tend to spend a lot more time with patients. And that's when we spend more time with people, we tend to have more of an emotional connection or attachment to them, right? So that's the reason why, according to Gallup and Pew polling. But if we use that fact to our advantage, not in an effort to take advantage of the patients, but more so just to celebrate it, that we're trusted. So therefore, we need to make us the number one reason why, right? If a patient's ever asked, why do you go to Dr. Smith? That's a great question. It's because I really trust Dr. Smith and I trust Betty Jo, the hygienist. I trust all the team members. They're just so fantastic. I feel like they take really good care of me. And that takes time to implement in your practice. But if you do that, you are basically destroying the insurance strategy as it pertains to how the insurance companies deceive the patient, right? The patients are now on your side. And having that in-network reason pushed all the way down. Now, when you go out of network, it'll be so much easier and you'll retain so many more patients because the reason why they come to you is because of you, right? Here's a bonus solution. I'm going to end with this. We sort of covered all the day-to-day things in terms of admin strategies, but I do believe more and more practices need to go out of network, mainly because the data is showing that it is so much less stressful to be out of network, even with Delta Dental. If you do it the right way, and this webinar tonight is not about going out of network, but I want to encourage you to think about it. The reasons why to go out of network is, of course, you get paid more, but from the patient perspective, a top reason that resonates with people is that when patients hear a script like this is that, hey, we're thinking about going out of network because in-network is so restrictive and it threatens our ability to sustain good quality care. And we have to make a change in an effort for us to protect how we treat you and every other patient that comes to our practice. So we're just thinking about going out of network as an option and talking to you and everybody else that has the same dental plan. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. You don't have to say anything about it today. I just wanted to kind of bring it up, right? We're not going to make a quick decision. And if we do go that route, it's going to be done very carefully. And you will know in writing. We're going to outline what that means if that's the direction that we want to go. Something short along those lines, and you do that with as many patients as you can as they come in. That's another great way to get patients to reconsider. Well, why do I come here? What do I value more? Do I value the fact that they are in network, or do I value the fact that I really believe and trust that they're giving me the best quality? Am I willing to give that up by going somewhere else? So now you're influencing the patient to think and ponder, what do I value more, insurance or quality? 95% of the public, it's quality. About 5 to 10% of people will always want to go in network, and that's hard to escape. But trust me, those patients are patients that you could afford to lose, and it's probably best to let them be somebody else's problem because almost always those are patients that are really, really tough to deal with, right? So out of network wise, this is sort of just some basic suggestions is always take control of the conversation. New patient wise, when new patients call in, when they ask if I'm in network, I don't give them an immediate answer. I don't ignore it. They say, do you take Delta? I said, thank you so much for calling. I'm going to get to your question here in just a second. But who do I have the pleasure of chatting with? That's such a friendly way to break the ice, right? But it's also a friendly way to take control over the conversation. Is a simple way to take control of a conversation is to ask a question. And if you lose control, ask another question. And sort of be assertive, and kind of friendly and kind as you kind of ask your line of questioning. But so for that patient, I'd say who do I have the pleasure of speaking with? Jill, I'm so glad that you called today. To answer your question, we are actually considered an out-of-network, non-restricted provider with Delta Dental. So that is out of network. And what that means is essentially, for in-network is very restrictive on dentists, dental practices. And we've chosen to take a route to protect the type of quality that we give because our standard is very high. by not allowing the insurance carriers to control that. And that's the reason why we have a lot of Delta patients that come to us, right? We'd love to get you scheduled to experience, our state-of-the-art care, something along those lines, right? And then you just pivot then into scheduling or whatever your script might be as to why they called or whatever it might, whatever it is. What you find is that most patients schedule under that kind of script. The patients that don't schedule are the ones that are skeptical, and they won't even tell you their names. Like, no, I'm not going to give you my name. I just want to know you take Delta. My immediate answer is, I'm so sorry, we don't. And then they hang up, and then they go be somebody else's problem. That's how I keep the unpleasant patients from coming in. I filter them just as much as they're trying to filter us, okay? So quality goes a long way. As it pertains to out-of-network, what you will find is that the very last bullet point, this is a codex study. I would take a photo of this because if you do the math and reverse engineer that into your numbers, you'll find that out-of-network is actually not that scary. Even doing a down economy, it's not that bad. It's actually very much superior to being in network in terms of stress and income. So a 20% increase in fees. So this is the last bullet point. A 20% increase in fees means that I will earn the same amount of profits on 55.5% of my sales volume, or in this case, my treatment volume, right? In other words, when we convert that to patient numbers, I would have to lose 45.5% of my patients. If all I got was a 20% increase, I would have to lose 45.5% of my patients to break even on profitability. Now, I will tell you that we've been helping CDA members drop Delta for a few years now, is that the highest rate of attrition that I've ever seen was 21%. The average rate of attrition that you see when you drop Delta is 19% in California. But you're getting 42, 46, 48, for some practices, 51% more in overall revenue. That means your fees are going up 51%. So in terms of risk, you would have to lose like 60+% of your patients to then start to see a decline in revenue, profitability. So the numbers for this Codex study made available by the Thriving Dentist Organization essentially is saying that you don't have anything to worry about. If you go out of network with the right process, the right scripting, just using the right tools to do it, out of network is very much superior. And that is something that will help the entire industry. As more doctors go out of network, we'll start to see a lot of these insurance issues subside over time. I'm going to end with just a quick analogy and an explanation on this whole concept of 2 degrees or 2%. We often ignore 2 degrees and 2%. What you heard today is less than 2 degrees and 2% of all the concepts that we've discussed. So my advice is to continue learning, and I'll give you some resources in the end that you can continue down that path as it pertains to what we just talked about. At 1 foot, we're looking at a ½ an inch, quite insignificant. At a mile, we're looking at 60 yards, big deal. But once we start to increase the baseline number that we're measuring against, 2 degrees at 1,300 miles is more than a marathon. In 1979, Air New Zealand had this flight destination. They would pack a bunch of people on a DC-10 jet. You remember those really loud, long engine DC jet planes? They're so loud. They only put people in the window seats and the aisles. And it was a sightseeing tour. They would go down to Antarctica, check out Mount Erebus, get as low as they can to look at the penguins if they could see them with their binoculars and the landscape. It was said to be a very relaxing tour, right? An airplane tour, sightseeing tour. Well, on this particular day, once the pilots reached 10,000 feet, the protocol was at that point to get the flight coordinates from air traffic control as written in the flight plan. And in this case, when the pilots received the radio communication for the coordinates to dial into so that they could get on the path of going down to Antarctica, it was a coordinate that was 2 numbers off of the original flight plan numbers. But they decided to follow the number anyway. And they dialed it in simply because as the pilots, air traffic control is the law. If you disobey them, it's a very serious federal violation, right? So they went about this flight. They were supposed to be on the dotted line, but because they were 2 degrees off course at 10,000 feet, which is basically they're still in New Zealand at the time. After traveling 1,300 miles, they were 28 miles off course. So 1,300 miles. The automations in the aircraft indicated now it's time to descend. We've traveled 1,300 miles. Let's descend from 32,000 to 6,500 so that we can have a nice view of the landscape. But the other thing is that the cloud level in Antarctica that day was at 7,500 feet. Mount Erebus sits at around 13,000 feet. So they had to descend below the cloud line to get to the coastline here on the dotted line on the screen, just so that they could start the tour, the sightseeing tour. Little did they know, because the aircraft back then did not have the terrain warning systems as we do now, they had no idea that as they were descending from 32,000 to 6,500, they had no idea that they were facing a 13,000-foot mountain, because the visibility was so low, clouds were very thick, and they just ended up crashing into the mountain. So that was a 2-degree mistake that ended up costing the lives of everybody on board. And I share this mainly because we can't ignore a 2-degree mistake in any aspect of our lives, especially if that 2-degree mistake hinges over time to where 30 years from now, that 2-degree error from 30 years ago is greatly magnified. And the way we avoid that is by learning, is by getting more education, finding the truth to concepts and ideas. And so as far as what's next step, the next steps are, is I just ask that, maybe we shouldn't be tempted to do something like this in an effort to be more competitive. And I know you're laughing, so I'll just move on from here. Here are 3 resources. SayNoToPPOs.com. The mission for SayNoToPPOs.com is a podcast. It's insurance-related information. And you can watch a bunch of episodes about what we talked about today. And we are going to have a bunch of new episodes with a bunch of people that we're interviewing over the next 3 months. Veritas Dental Resources, that's my personal website. Kind of gives you very basic information regarding negotiating fees. And then VerisDental.com, that's going to house most of our insurance-related education that you'll find on Say No to PPOs, including articles. We're just in the final stages of editing the continuing education component of our websites, but check those out in an effort to get more education surrounding what we talked about. Or if you want a copy of these slides, have questions, or want copies of the letter, the refund letter, or anything else, just send me an email at ben@veritasdentalresources.com. Folks, I believe that's it for me today. Unless there are any questions, perhaps maybe we can ask Jim or Mike, if there are any questions that have come in from the group today. Okay, I don't see any questions on my side here. So I'm going to turn the meeting back to our folks at the headquarters to wrap things up. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for being with us tonight, and hope you learned a few fun new things today. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you, Ben. Pleasure having you again.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.